Hi, Tracy and Tim. I'm Tiffany. I'm with Pop Horror. It's good to see you
Hi,
guys today.
you
Absolutely.
too.
I'm excited. Three T's. So I guess so we have the Blackening, which came from the short from the comedy troupe Three Peat, correct?
hmm
And it was you, Tracy, who had seen it and showed it to manager and producer Brian Dobbins, correct?
Oh yeah, we
And
got
you
all the nuances. Yes.
Yeah, I'm a real big nerd for how things get started. Like that's always my favorite thing because I'm also I'm a micro budget filmmaker, and so I like knowing all the little ins and outs.
hmm
And so what was that process like for you guys developing it from the short skit into an amazing full feature film?
Yeah. Well, I saw it and I called Dwayne, and luckily he agreed to like partner with me and let me help him figure out what the movie was. And Tim came on board as a producer only at first. And then Dwayne and I just kind of got together. We didn't really know each other, but we got together in this like hotel and spent a weekend just kind of throwing out all types of ideas of what the movie could be. And I brought note cards, I brought poster boards and dry erase like boards, all that stuff. And I
Yeah.
just was kind of like, we just got to map out this whole thing. And I would say maybe like 60% of that initial conversation is still the movie today, which I think is really impressive that, right. It's pretty crazy, but he already had just, great characters to work with and to kind of just deepen and develop. And I knew we were going to keep them in a cabin in the woods. I was like, we have to. And then it was just trying to figure out why they're there, how do they all know each other, who's the villain, what happens throughout it. And then I think the biggest thing was creating the game of the Blackening. We knew we wanted trivia in there. And I think Tim had a big hand in actually making the game feel tangible. So it's not just trivia, but we added a lot of different elements to it. And then I think we hid the bad draft from Tim. And then on the second draft, he read it and was like, oh, this is amazing. I'm just kidding.
No,
And,
that,
and I'm going to direct it. Yeah.
basically. Um, and that's exactly what happened. I read the script, loved it. And as we were going to look for a director to take the helm and kind of make it a thing, I just loved it so much that I said, "Why not me?" And when you find something that speaks to you, when you read a script and you can see the movie after you finish reading it, I find not to be shy in those situations and take the opportunity.
Awesome, awesome. And so this is actually the first horror project for you guys because I know you have a lot of comedy, and then of course, like Tim, you have like the Fantastic Four and all the comic the superhero stuffs like that. So, I mean, there's obviously a good element of comedy, and there's like this perfect blend, which I think is what makes for really good horror as well, because you have these tense situations where you're kind of like, and especially for us, it's like we have these important real life situations that are what Black people face every day, right? Well, not like being sequestered away with a board game, but yeah, the actual threats of of what was showcased in the film. So, what was it difficult for you guys to kind of like tap into the horror elements, or did this like come pretty naturally? Like, what was that process for you guys, like exploring that horror aspect instead of it being like purely comedy?
I found it quite more natural than I thought it would be. I think once I start to kind of get into it and start to watch some of these movies again with a different eye for what was going to happen, I realized that there were quite a few horror films that I just would go watch. And there's so many times in just kind of movies, kind of commercial movies, where there's a horror moment or a moment that scares somebody. And I found that it was actually fun to do it. And so with the script being the way it was and kind of in this brilliant state of already kind of creating this combination of horror and comedy, I already felt comfortable with the comedy, and then to just find the moments I needed to dive into horror. I always find that when I do a project, I'm looking for something that stretches me, something that you're a little afraid that you might get wrong, because it makes you pay attention. And so it was just kind of something that I surprisingly found that I wanted to do, that I needed to do, and hopefully I'll kind of keep dabbling with it a little bit, and for the rest of my career.
Yeah, I was actually going to be my next question is if you guys feel like you'd be doing any more horror projects going forward, and what you feel like if there's a specific genre. Because I'm a big horror fan, obviously working for pop horror. But I think that there's a lot of things that you can explore in horror that you like, say, doing just like a straight out drama you can't really fully address. And comedy is just as well a good way to explore those things too. So are you guys actually horror fans, or was this like just like completely different and alien for you?
No, I'm a horror fan. I grew up literally watching all of it. And I don't know why I didn't think about breaking into horror like sooner. But when I saw Dwayne Short, because it was also funny in my mind, even strategically, I thought to myself, this is probably the right way in because it's not as big of a pivot for me as if I was doing like a really like dark, gritty horror. Like
Mhm,
the Blackening still is very much like tonally what I do pretty well. So
mhm.
I was like, this is, and I might, I'm like Tim where I like to evolve and learn different things. So eventually maybe I'll do darker horror, but I thought if I was going to dabble in it, this is probably the right one to start with. But I've loved horror for a really long time. And I actually do think that comedy and horror have a lot of overlaps as far as like construction, because with suspense and with like big broad jokes and set pieces, you need them constantly in comedy and you need them constantly in horror
Right.
just to kind of keep changing the pacing and all of that stuff and keep people engaged. You have to keep like upping the stakes and keep the plot moving forward in a way that just a straight drama doesn't have to adhere to as much. So I weirdly found horror to be kind of akin to comedy in a way that I could wrap my mind around pretty easily. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like a lot of psychological horror more than like the slasher.
Yeah.
But when you have a slasher film and you have more of like, I guess, character development and an actual story around it, I can get into it. I just kind of get a little squeamish when it comes to gore, which is also kind of funny because I grew up with that, and I was
Right.
like Nightmare on Elm Street was my first film when I was too small, but but yeah. And what about you, Tim? How do you feel about like horror as like a genre itself?
Oh, I love it. It's just it's like another tool of storytelling that I kind of get into. I even remember growing up on the slasher movies, like you're saying, Nightmare, but also Halloween,
Yeah.
and Friday the 13th, and even Exorcist, and even other movies like Jaws and Aliens. Like there's still those types too that we don't immediately go to, but there's a horror in those that I just grew up loving. And at some point, you realize that those films so well that you kind of have this encyclopedia of horror inside of you that until you kind of dive into it, you don't realize how much you are a fan of it, how much it does. It was something that you grew up with. So that's what kind of this project did for me. It kind of awakened this kind of another tool of storytelling that I think I'm going to continue to visit.
Very cool. That's exciting. I look forward to I mean I love both of your work, so comedy, horror doesn't matter, but I'm super excited to see what you guys would come up with, going forward with horror. So like I said, I come from like a micro budget background, so it's like everything that we do is, I mean, there's an organizational process, but I'm sure it's like a relatively different process as far as like how we structure things out and get to the point of filming. So as like with you two, writer director, and then going into production, what was that process like with taking the script to develop it and actually make it the film that we ultimately ended up seeing?
Look, what was great for me was once Tracy and Dwayne gave me this script, which I think from a storytelling standpoint was just kind of brilliant. What's fun about that is I know now it gives me more clues of where I need to go in terms of what I'm going to create visually. When it comes down to the cabin in the woods that they described was pretty specific. So then you know what you're looking for. You know that although you're looking at several locations, there's one that has to speak to you. You know that the from where the big room to the kitchen to there being a basement to all of these things that are necessary. It just kind of allowed me to kind of be specific about what I was searching for. And when I found it and I knew it was right, it was easier to say yes to it. And it was also very easy to say no. Things just didn't work until they kind of gave me the opportunity to take their script and make it everything I thought it could be. So I think from bringing, and then of course we didn't, when you speak of micro budget, this is one of those films that we had a pretty small budget. We had to shoot this in probably less than half the time that I'm used to. And so there was a lot of planning that had to be done with that as well. And also tell the cast that we're going to have to move faster than normal, and we're going to have to get coverage faster than they're probably used to. But that's what was great about the entire team. We all understood the limitations that we had, but inside of those limitations, we all still felt that we could kind of deliver something that was going to be worth watching.
Very cool. And so with the cast and their characters, was it pretty much straight from script to, they portray their characters exactly as on script, or was there more agency for them to bring their own life to each character that you guys had created?
I mean, we kind of encouraged it. What was great about the casting process is we just had the freedom to choose who we thought was best for the roles. And in doing that, we not only found great actors, we also found people that could kind of give, something more to the already complex characters that Tracy and Dwayne created. They could also bring personal, kind of little things that just kind of spiced up the great words that were already on the page. And I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the advantage, because people always say it's better to have all this money, but the advantage of a micro budget, honestly, is that you get to cast people that are just the best for it and not necessarily the people that a studio wants.
Right.
And so you get to have the people that are like really excited and can dig into it. And then also as a writer, I just felt this whole thing was so liberating because I got to write the movie I wanted to write. Because usually there's so much that gets lost in studio movies because there's just so many cooks in the kitchen and so many, changes that occur. And then by the end, sometimes you don't even recognize the script anymore. And I never felt that way. And it was because we just didn't have the money or the time to develop it like that.
Couldn't second guess ourselves, no time.
Like, studios sometimes have too much time on their hands to like toy with something. And we had such a small window to do this. Like Tim had an opening is really how it happened. And then we were kind of just writing to make this at a certain point. So just for an example, I remember Tim was like, okay, so we got this location and there's a well in there. So now there's a well in the script. Like, go make that happen.
Yeah, make that happen.
Right. And then you're like, okay, well, there's a well. Okay, great. And then it's like, you get another call and it's like, hey, we're not gonna be able to fit all these characters into this room. So find a reason for the characters to not all be there. And you're like, okay, cool. So you're just kind of, with micro budget stuff, you're writing to what's available and writing to your resources. But I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
You're just problem solving in real time. And sometimes magical stuff happens like out of that, process. So I loved it. Like I actually now kind of want to stick to, not for all of them, I got to make some money, but like, yeah, but I kind of, right, I was like, God, don't take me too seriously. But I want to stick to micro budgets on some level because it's liberating to not have to go through the development process, and you actually make it. I like making stuff. So it's not satisfying to write 17 drafts and it never gets made. Like this is just a better situation.
Absolutely. And then in wrapping up, what are you guys hoping the biggest takeaway is from audiences coming to see The Blackening?
We love entertaining audiences. We just it's the best thing. We really want people to just have a great time. We think look, the world's heavy. We feel like this is something that kind of it makes you laugh. We don't need you to really think too much about it after you leave. If you want to, great. If you don't, it's all good. And we're kind of into that zone. We like commercial. We like laughter, and I just hope that the audience walk out of it feeling a little better than when they walked into the theater.
I would completely agree. I want people to just have a great time. And I hope that people go with friends. I just see it as something that you enjoy with friends or family or just in a group. I mean, you can go by yourself. That's cool too. But I just think that it's better enjoy it in a big group. And every time that I've seen it, like with a packed house, it's just a really cool energy. And I feel like uplifted just like sitting amongst people laughing and enjoying it. So I always think just go with a group because you'll enjoy it like 10 times more.
Yeah, I just moved out to LA at the start of May, and so I got to catch the one of the screenings, and I was so happy. And I was like, I can't wait to come back with all my friends and watch this. It's
Yes.
so fun.
Oh, yay.
We love hearing
Love
that.
it.
So, well, that's pretty much all I have for you, and I think we're at time anyway. But I appreciate you guys so much. I'm glad that I had this opportunity to chat with you about your amazing film, and yeah, can't wait to share it with people and see more of what you guys have coming later on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.